I set up Speculo back in 2017 with a fellow colleague of mine called James Thompson, and it was really built to be a true kind of independent consulting business working around kind of transformation and sort of program and project management and elements of security, really. So we work with a host of the kind of resellers and integrators out there supporting their teams and providing hybrid capability for them to scale their businesses and deliver good work. And we also do probably about 20% of our business direct into corporate organisations within kind of construction, media, and a couple of other kind of spheres, really, where we know people.
I suppose let's get into the meeting, which is why the event's called Ask a Leader. I suppose how you actually see leadership, because I mean the definition of that is a position. Now, do you see it like that, or do you see it as an internal thing that a person is a leader or they're not?
I think people are either leaders or not, and I think there's definitions of leadership where people view it as the head of someone, the director, the CEO, whatever. There is leadership, but you find leadership in all elements of teams. It doesn't necessarily, someone doesn't actually have to have a title to have it. It's about leading. The people can be leading a piece of work, they can be leading all sorts of things. And it's really about, for me, leadership's about your behaviour more than anything else, and building an environment where people can kind of be successful and deliver whatever they need to deliver effectively and in a kind of controlled and safe environment where they've got people around them that they can go to for help, and they've got a path to escalate any issues, problems, troubles, whether it's financial within the project, whether it's personal, whatever it is. And that, for me, that's what leadership's about, really. It's about creating an environment where people can achieve and do the best work that they can. Because strangely enough, when people are relaxed and happy and enjoying what they do, they tend to do really good stuff. When people are unhappy and under pressure and not being looked after, then strangely enough, their work tends to tail off, has been my experience over the years.
I suppose that leads nicely into the next question, which is what are the upsides you've experienced yourself from in leadership positions you've had? And maybe you'd like to sort of list one or two of those, just because I know that everybody's sort of dropping in bit by bit by bit.
And for me personally, the upside for leadership has been about supporting and helping other people and helping people go on their kind of career journeys and achieve the things they want to do. I've worked with salespeople who, in the past, who were very effective salespeople, but were at a very low level in sales because they hadn't been given the support and the guidance to kind of help them move up and start to engage with people at board level. And, you know, I've taken people on that journey and taken them in and got them to sit and talk to C-level people, and, you know, or I've talked to the C-level people to start with them on my shoulder, and then, you know, and then I've stepped back and let them kind of pick up and run with it. And so for me, that you know, the real upside of leadership is seeing the positive outcomes around you for the people more than anything else, for me personally.
So has that been a sort of like one-to-one thing, or has it been training that you got them, or a mix of both?
A mix, really. So there's a mix of kind of some formal training, and it depends on the role. So I'm talking about a commercial piece there. You know, if you go into operational side, there's a whole other area that you kind of get into. But yeah, for me, it's a mixture of kind of giving people access to the right level of training, but also giving them time. You know, me, if I can help them, if I've got the skills and the knowledge and the capability to support and help them, giving them the time to support and coach them and take them where they need to go or where they really want to go, but don't necessarily have the baseline understanding of how to get there.
Right. Okay, and that obviously we're talking here about from a sales perspective, or is that in general what you've experienced managing the different teams you have over the years?
Yeah, you know, that has been reflected across operational teams, you know, in all areas, because it's helping people. When I was running a managed services business, you know, when I got involved taking that on, the P&L ownership, what I found was the senior leadership team in it were very, very good technically and understood technically what they needed to do, but they didn't sort of fully understand necessarily the balance of the business side of it, of what was important, what made money and what didn't. And, you know, and I helped a lot of that team kind of start to understand that and actually start to focus their teams, what the outcomes on what needed to be done for them to be effective, but also for the wider business to be effective, which, then by doing that, you start to put out lots of fires and things become a lot more relaxed and a lot more happy, and then people can have training and then they can develop, and, so it becomes very much a kind of self-fulfilling prophecy that if you help people on that journey to do the right things, then it starts to give everyone more time and more capability to develop over time.
So it sounds a lot like compounding, doesn't it, really?
Yeah, you could term it as that, I suppose.
Yeah, I suppose compounding and people skills. I suppose that you sort of mentioned it in passing. It's from over the last sort of decade or so. Maybe the last 5 years. Let's keep it short. The sort of downsides or challenges you've seen in business leadership. You sort of touched on one or two there, but
I mean, the real challenge of taking on any leadership role is taking on that level of kind of responsibility and ownership, and actually having to, having to be that person to help and support and guide those people. So, I've talked to people who've talked about wanting to move up into management or leadership roles over the years, and I've kind of, I've talked to them about the true context of what that means versus the role they're doing today, because I think often people get very focused on management or leadership paths as being the way to develop their career, and sometimes it's not the right thing for that individual, because that the pressures and the things that come with that job and the things that they're not going to enjoy, whereas actually they could develop a career, if it's on a technical path, by becoming the absolute superstar in that area and becoming the leader in that field, without moving into a management leadership role. So yeah, there are challenges to it, and I'm fortunate in that I've enjoyed quite a lot of those challenges. But then I've also worked with people who have taken on leadership roles and have absolutely hated them, and have then ultimately stepped away from them and gone back to doing the things that they really enjoyed doing, because that's what made them happy and made them get out of bed in the morning. And I think that's quite an important differentiator for any job. It doesn't matter whether it's leadership or whether you're being a project manager or whether you're running a managed services business or being a CEO. You've got to enjoy doing it, otherwise you're not going to get out of bed and be effective every day. It would be my view on that.
Do you think that makes such a big difference? I mean, I always sort of me, I'm sort of one of those people that says, if you love it, you're going to beat anybody else, in quotes. I say beat, in the best possible way. If somebody loves what they're doing, they're going to be 10,000 times better than somebody that just does it because they're looking to make a career, in quotes. Do you think that's true?
Yeah.
Or?
No, I do think that's true. I mean, if someone enjoys what they're doing, then the results will be far stronger than someone who's just doing it because someone's paying them, and yeah. Do you know what I mean? Because there will be an intrinsic interest. There'll be, the fact they'll go away and research stuff in their own time. You get all of those fringe benefits if someone's really enjoying something. Whereas if someone's just doing it because that's what they're paid to do, they could probably be very competent at it and do a very good job. But I don't think you would get you're not going to get the same level as you would from someone who is absolutely enjoying it. And that's the other part in leadership as well, is that I've often witnessed organisations getting very excitable about people who are underperforming, and often when you look at it, people underperform because of all sorts of reasons. But if someone's very good at something and suddenly they're underperforming, there's always a reason why, and invariably it comes down to some kind of personal pressures or things like that. So so you really need to understand what's going on in that person's world to kind of help them come back to being the person that they were before. Lots of organisations I see get very upset with people very quickly and try and move them on or do things like that, which I think is completely wrong. You just need to understand what's going on with that individual. People don't suddenly become bad at what they do overnight if they were once good.
Yeah. Do you think the performance improvement plans and stuff like that, do you think that's I mean, I've seen them in co-ops over the years, but I mean, what do you think of that type of thing then?
How many people have you seen come back from a PIP and be successful?
One.
Yeah, so that's kind of my view.
Right. Okay.
It's I think once you hit the point where you're having to put someone on a PIP in corporate land, it's already over really, and unfortunately it then becomes just a painful process and task for whoever the manager leader is who's having to administer that, and the individual and if the individual is, very rarely do people come back from that. If an organisation's got to a point where they're putting someone on a PIP, then the writing's kind of already on the wall really, in my view.
So okay, when it comes to that, so the alternative to something like that is that then what you're saying is leadership? Is that picking that up before it comes to that to that disastrous level?
Yeah. I mean, you've got to identify what's going on and address it. So you might I've had people in the past who have been incredibly good at their job, and then I've witnessed a downward spiral in their capability, and when I've kind of scratched the surface, I've started to uncover all sorts of things, whether it's personal relationship issues, family stuff, all sorts of things, and invariably when you get to the root cause of those things, that's why the performance has fallen off. And then if you can support, and I've supported people through those kind of issues and made sure that they've still been able to function and deliver their job, to a level, not as good as you would have seen from them in the past, but good enough. And then when I've seen them come out the other side of that, they've returned back to the level of capability they were, if not better. And actually, they've also become, they've become an incredibly loyal member of your team, because you also know that they know wholeheartedly that you've got their back and that you're going to look after them and that you're going to protect them and defend them from, things in the future. And that's quite important, because, if you're a leader, you've got team members, those team members, need to be looked after. You need to make sure that they're okay. And if, when I've worked in businesses, if people have taken umbrage with my team member and sort of started bad mouthing them, then I've pointed out the fact that that's great, but if they want to come from my team member, they need to come through me first. So, because it's ultimately my decision as to whether that individual is doing their job correctly or not, or et cetera, et cetera.
Do you think that then extends also when you're not necessarily officially, you have a title, that extends to team members as well? That is also leadership?
Yes, yeah, and that's kind of, that's what I was saying at the beginning, really, in that just a title and role can put someone in a position of leadership, but all individuals are in a degree of leadership, because if you've got a team of people working on a project, you need all of those people to kind of support, gel, get on with one another, trust one another, have each other's back, help each other kind of through the good, the bad, and within there, and which all of those things ultimately are starting to show leadership traits. So, and if you have someone in that team who is ready to throw anyone around them under the bus or whatever, then clearly they have no leadership traits, and actually, they're going to start causing a wider issue within that team. So, and at that point, as someone with overall responsibility for that team, if you see that kind of behaviour going on, then you need to address that and change it and remove that person from that team and make sure that there is that trust and belief within that group of people. Because unless you're all on the journey together, no matter what you're doing, whether it's sales, managed services, transformation, big programs of work, you've got to be in it together and all focused on the end goal together and got each other's backs. Otherwise, it tends to become difficult very quickly.
Is that something then where you just start a conversation with the individual? How do you sort of, Or do you have some sort of, in quotes, framework that you've got in your head that you say, right, okay, this is how I'm going to be dealing with that?
Yeah, I mean, if I witness something, well, as in if someone's being disruptive within a team, yeah, if when I've witnessed people being disruptive within a team, I've engaged with those individuals first off to find out what's going on, because sometimes, going back to my earlier point, it might not actually be anything to do with the job. It might be stuff that's going on in the outside world that's putting pressure on them of some description, which is driving that behaviour. So you kind of need to get to the root cause of what's going on, and then you can address it. And if it's something that you can address, then that's great. If it's something that you can't address, then you need to push that individual to understand what the output of their actions are to the wider team, and try and educate them on that. And and you can give them guidance and support. And then if they're not going to ever grasp it, then you need to then potentially switch that person out into another team, or move them to another part of the business, or whatever, in order to allow things to go on successfully.
Okay. I suppose that segues quite nicely into how you would actually build a leader. And if you are in sort of that stage where you're looking to build leaders, how do you actually do that? Because it's one of those things that, honestly, to me, always sounds a bit like magic. But maybe you've got a better answer than I do.
Yeah, I mean, it's. I don't think there's any set formula for necessarily for sort of building a leader, but I mean, if someone, again, I suppose again, the only point, if people are interested in lots of people are leaders in whatever they do, but if someone wants to step up into a role where there is sort of a wider leadership view, the first thing is to make sure that they fully understand what that means and the impact that will have on their life and their time and things like that. So, when I've talked to people before about it, if you suddenly go from being responsible for yourself within a group of people delivering a piece of work, whatever it is, right? Whether you're a commercial head, operational, whether that's one thing. If you then suddenly step up into a role where you've got 10 people that are looking to you for guidance every day, and you're their escalation point, and everything else, suddenly that dynamic changes massively, and actually your control over your time and management of things changes massively, because no matter how effective you are at managing time and things happen, and someone's ill, somebody's dog dies, if something, it's that just, things happen on a day-to-day basis, and suddenly, you think, oh, I'm in control today, I'm going to do X, Y, Z, and then you get a phone call that this has happened, and you're like, oh my God, okay. And and so that's sort of one of the things that people have to be ready for when going into leadership, and that they need to be happy to be a little bit flexible with their time and manage their time, and put team members first on stuff, because otherwise you just can't do it effectively. And then beyond that, as I said, for me, it's about making sure that you create a culture that allows people to be free and happy and able to do the best that they can do. So, I've been in leadership roles where I've had interesting people and organisations above and around me, and I've acted very much as an insulation layer to the team of people that have been working for me, because they didn't need to see or hear any of that noise. They just needed to concentrate on whatever they needed to concentrate on. So again, there's also quite a key thing in a leadership role for me is actually absorbing a certain amount of noise and pressure that comes in any organisation, whether it's a corporate or whether it's investors or whatever, soaking that up and translating what's important through to the team below, because they don't necessarily need to hear all of that or see all of that or be stressed out by it.
I mean, I've certainly, from my perspective, I know we've worked together and I've seen you do that. So One of the reasons why I respect you, even as a Yorkshireman, even though you're not from that neck of the woods.
Far too southern for that.
I suppose there's one last question, and perhaps when you are looking, how do you actually? I mean, you've obviously sort of, a lot of people talk about leadership. And I remember my grandfather saying to me, he said, I asked him once what a leader meant to him, and he said, "You'll know when you get there." which really annoyed me, because he said, "You've got to learn to lead yourself first," and I didn't understand that at all. It took me about 10 years to even have any sort of idea what that looked like. But when did you sort of realize, right, this is something for me, I do want to go for that? What was it that you did to sort of progress that?
I mean, I suppose I fell into it's the wrong word, but I was in a role which I was enjoying. I was very good at, and my current boss at the time decided to move on, and I was asked to step up into the leadership role and take on his role and some other bits. And I'd never done it before. I wasn't sure about it, and I sort of decided to do it. And actually then I was able to build a very effective team around me of a myriad of different characters, but that was deliberate by me, because I wanted that kind of blend of people. And I enjoyed it, and I started doing it, and I just enjoyed building, people up, and I enjoyed developing the people, and I enjoyed kind of getting the structure kind of right, and those kind of things, really. So it was, it's a funny one, because I wasn't 100% sure about doing it, and then I did it, and then I found that I enjoyed it, and so therefore I continued with leadership roles, and helping to build and develop people. And that's always been the bit for me, really, is that I've enjoyed, seeing people who are good at what they do become exceptional at what they do through a little bit of help and guidance. And I think that's the most fulfilling thing around it.
Sorry, I'm sorry to interrupt.
That's right.
Did you have somebody that supported you in that process? Or?
No, I kind of learned most as I went along, if I'm honest. I made lots of mistakes. I haven't had a huge amount of sort of formal coaching or training or anything. I have had a little bit. I did some work, around kind of NLP and E360, so emotional intelligence stuff, which is sort of very interesting, and I think that's a very important thing for leaders, is the emotional intelligence side of things, because that underpins everything, really. As I was saying, it's like people don't suddenly become bad at their job overnight. There's a whole layer of reasons why underneath, and so you need to be able to get to the root of that. I kind of learned through my own mistakes, Ken.
I know. I've been there while you've been fixing some mistakes. Once you've got the experience, I've only seen the end result, mate. So.
Yeah. I mean, unfortunately, that's the way. I didn't work in organisations where I had a big training team where I could go and be put on programs and stuff. So I had to kind of learn how to do it myself as I went. I remember originally when I first did it, I always cited Band of Brothers and Major Winters, because that was the big show at the time when I first started doing a leadership role, and that kind of became my reference point, was what would Major Winters do, because he was if you've ever seen it, he very much looked after his people. Like, he tells off one of his lieutenants for gambling with his men, because he's like, well, if you take all their money, how can you then look after them and leave them effectively in the field and things like that? So it's kind of there's a whole kind of ethos in there that's quite interesting when you get into it. It's not the absolute, but it was a quite useful basis.
So I mean, at the end of the day, from if I'm hearing that correctly, it's more service than anything else.
Yes. Yeah. As a leader, you're not, you're not, you are there to get people to do stuff, but you're also there to, you are there to help them and, facilitate all of that work, and what they're doing, what they're trying to achieve. So, and that's where some people get it wrong. They kind of think they get to the top of the tree, and so everyone's there for their benefit. Unfortunately, that's not the case. You're actually there for the team's benefit.
I totally agree.
And grow them and make them the people that make them as effective as they possibly can be.
Okay. Well, that's the end of the questions. But if anybody would like to ask a question, you're going to have to request to come on stage. So please do, or forever hold your peace, because I know Mr. Fish is quite a busy man. So anybody got a question they'd like to ask Ben?